We can share. Okay, so thank you everyone. I'm Andrew Gould, the Actionable Futurist. I'm hoping at the end of this session and the day you're going to leave with some actionable insights. We've got a fantastic panel today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, your company, what you do, and one extra thing, what was the first thing you asked ChatGPT? Staci.
Hi, my name is Staci Warden, and I'm the CEO of the Algorand Foundation. Algorand is a next-generation Layer 1 blockchain. And the first thing that I asked ChatGPT is, I'm speaking on an AI panel tomorrow. What kinds of remarks do you think I should make about crypto and AI? No, that's not true. I don't remember what I first asked.
Miguel.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Miguel Avalos. I'm the Senior Director of Global Customer Marketing for LinkedIn. I've been at LinkedIn for 7 months, so actually my background is mostly in tech. I was at Google for almost 10 years, and I'm working for Samsung as well. I've been working as well with a lot of startups. I collaborated with Antler, the VC. So all in all is to say that I have a lot of exposure with the startups and with AI industry, not only because of my day job, but on the things that I do on the side.
What's the first thing you asked ChatGPT? Why don't let you get away with that?
I don't remember clearly because it was a while ago. I'm a heavy user, and I use Gemini, obviously, as well at some point. But it was around travel, and I still use the platforms for travel tips, and I try to test different things here and there.
Hi, everyone. So I'm AI business partner at Vinci Construction. So I work around taking concepts from ideation all the way through to implementation. And the first conversation with ChatGPT, I want to say it's something profound, but I think it was asking it to make poems for me in the most ridiculous ways possible.
Benjamin, welcome.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Is that on? So I think that it's on now. Okay. Yeah, my name is Ben. I work for IBM. I work in our autonomous automation software group. I focus on the infrastructure side of things. And so in my team, we look at things like strategy and acquisitions, but also building those new products in this area. I guess I actually probably have to confess I'm a Claude user. My girlfriend's dog's name's Claude, so it feels like I'm talking to him. But yeah, maybe thinking back, I think one of the first queries, not exactly like this, was actually about asking Claude what he wanted to be when he grew up. So, and you'll probably hear a little bit about that as we think about the products we're building now. So, yeah.
Staci, you had a point?
I do remember, actually, somebody on our BD team did a description of Algorand in the voice of Trump. This was like a year ago, and it was that's when I first realized.
Huge company, huge.
Hugely. It's the biggest blockchain out there, all this. So, yeah, I remember that.
And I think my first query was actually, who's Andrew Grill? Because I wanted to ask it something I thought I know the answer to, just to test it. So that was interesting. So the last panel was interesting. We really looked at where investment's going, the sort of things that investors are looking for. I want to go in this panel deeper in the weeds. We've got some people here that are actually running AI programs, getting their fingers dirty and burnt. And I want if I was in the audience today, I'd like to hear some success stories, some things maybe to avoid. I might start with you, Sammy, because you've got a really interesting use case in Vinci. You're in construction and running AI. So maybe just talk us through what you're using AI for at the moment.
So I think in the industries as a standard, compliance is a big issue. And that's definitely the case in construction. So one of the things that generally in construction we struggle with is quality on site. So an industry average, which surprises a lot of people, around 10% of a project's value is a cost due to defects, which is a high number and something that is kind of unacceptable. So the way we're using AI is, and the way we've seen across the industry, is quality management processes are often very inefficient and cumbersome. So we're able to inject AI into these processes and improve the speed at which we're producing a lot of documentation around compliance, but also if you think you've got a 100-page document, most engineers are not going to want to look through this every single time. So it's able to provide them with information that they wouldn't necessarily have even considered to start with. And I think around the success points that you were talking about, what we've seen is because we've started building solutions, we're now able to, one, upskill our current workforce in terms of understanding them better, but also if we've got a problem, we can talk to the startups that are coming to us, and we're more on a level playing field. So when they come to us with their, I guess, more marketing pitches, we're able to have the technical expertise. Even though we're not a tech company, we're able to ask them questions that kind of dig a bit deeper, rather than just taking everything they say about their solutions at face value.
Great. I'll unpack some of those in a minute. I just want to get from each of the panels some really good use cases. So, Ben, you're at IBM. I was at IBM, so always an IBMer. Nice to see another IBMer. What are you working on at the moment, and what are some of the success stories you've got from things IBM are doing and things that your clients are doing?
Yeah. So I think one of the ways we've tried to look at it is is to think about autonomous systems. And it was actually James made a comment on the last panel about sort of creative thinking and analytical thinking. And so we've actually kind of, if you take that analogy, to an individual person, individual brain, we often have talked in the past about this left brain, analytical type thinking, right brain, creative thinking, and that actually plays in the AI space as well. So when you dig into that, you start to see that actually what we have with LLMs right now and the current generation of foundation models is great creative thinking. That's right brain thinking, the ability to kind of come up with ideas, to take a whole load of input information and kind of match that to a particular problem. The thing that we don't have right now is the analytical side, and in particular areas where I've focused on infrastructure. LLMs and foundation models, they're not very good at understanding something quite important, time. And so time series is actually a frontier kind of problem for AI right now. And there are some innovations occurring in this space, and so we've been focused on that. How do we bring understanding information that's generated from infrastructure, time series telemetry, and things like that, applying an analytical AI approach to it to generate insights we can then match with the LLMs on the right brain creativity side. So that's something that we're finding we're getting some traction, and we're in beta testing right now with some clients around a new product, and that's proving quite useful.
And Miguel, I know you've been at LinkedIn for only sort of 7 months or so, but you've got a lot of experience in other organizations. Maybe you can bring them to the table, what you've seen is working well, and some use cases and real-world things that the audience would like to hear they should be considering as well.
Yeah, so I think that based on my experience in marketing, and as I mentioned, even when I was at Google, I was working with different types of industries, right? So AI started probably a couple of years ago, and I was listening recently to this podcast, Pivot, where the CEO of this semiconductor company, ADM, she was talking about the leap of 10 years, right? So it seems that we're in 2 years of the 10, and that made me reflect on the things that I have seen in the industries. And basically, marketing has been highly affected in general because it's about efficiency, it's about being faster on things. How do you translate? How do you pitches? How do you automate? And data is one of the things that obviously is fundamental on that. And when it comes to data, you have challenges because you cannot collect all the data from your customers. You have PII restrictions, and particularly in Europe. So then the use case that has been very successful has been around CRM. And CRM can be from big enterprise, like Salesforce is a good example, but you have for smaller companies, HubSpot, and even if you go to smaller ones, Attio, Folk, those are coming as good contenders in the CRM. But again, it's also a bit fragmented because you see that the use case is going to be different depending on the industry, the size of the company, or even the location. And I think that that is one of the challenges that is happening in general with AI, that the use case tend to be very fragmented. On the other hand, you have one that seems to be very applicable across the board, which is Gong. This is mostly for sales. If you guys have heard about Gong, big, small companies are trying to get the service because it's so good. You get all the recordings, and then you get all the insights right away, right? And you can understand what your product is doing well, how your sales force is selling or not, what marketing activities are being more successful, and you get that pulse basically on the day, right? So it's very rich, and I think that that's another good example of how things are evolving. But other than that, obviously we have productivity tools. At LinkedIn, not surprised, we use Copilot for everything. At Google, it was Gemini, so again, because it's what they built. But yeah, I think that those are the top lines.
Now, Staci, one thing I heard a lot in the last panel was the word trust. I wrote it down about 9 different times. As we move forward, trust in what we're seeing out of AI is going to be important. You do a lot of work in crypto. Where does the world and crypto AI collide where trust can be amplified?
Yeah, well, one of the most important way that AI and crypto collide is that AI is taking all the oxygen out of the room in crypto, which is highly annoying, I will say, as the leader of a layer one blockchain. But I think you know, AI is used in crypto, and it's kind of a natural affinity, right? So, you know, agents can talk to machines, they can interact with smart contracts, they do arb trades very well, bots reply quite easily, and crypto is very, you know, it's purely digital, and AI is digital, and so that's a kind of a natural marriage. But I think there's three important ways that crypto enables AI, actually makes AI possible. And the first, which is, I think, you know, the most fundamental, is to your point. It's the point that Ilya made earlier, like the doomsday scenario is that you don't know what's real and what's not, right? And blockchain, it's not about truth. So blockchain has the same kind of data in and data out, garbage in and garbage out problem that every database has, but it is integrity. And so blockchain can assert that something happened at a certain time, and if it's on the blockchain, it cannot be changed. It's immutable, and if it's altered, a record of that alteration will show up on chain. And this is going to be very important, of course, with AI and generated images and all of that. So you imagine you're you're a celebrity and you have a picture taken of yourself, or, you know, Dave Chappelle used to joke about this. You're a black guy, you got pulled over, you want a picture of yourself without cocaine sprinkled all over your clothes, because the police might have done that later. You know, you have this picture. If you have it on chain with a timestamp, if it's altered later, people can see that it's been altered later. And so I think this marriage is going to be very important. And then, you know, when you come back to me, I'll talk about the two other use cases, but I'll just flag them here. That crypto will enable AI agents to have agency. And this is also going to be fundamental. And then third, crypto enables decentralized compute. So you won't have this capture by the big players in AI. So I'll talk about those in the next round, but you're right to point out integrity as a fundamental kind of partnership between crypto and AI.
So Sammy, just back to you. So you've got a real use case there. You're using AI. Talk us through how you got to that point, and what was the friction points in your organization to actually get that application approved, in production, and people actually now using it? I'm sure people in the audience are all thinking about doing these applications, but just talk us through how it went from idea to implementation.
Yeah, so I guess I'll focus more on the bit that is the most challenging, at least from what I've seen, again, across the industry mostly. So I was at a Boston Consulting Group talk, and we think that AI is the difficult part. And, you know, working on AI solutions, I do find it quite difficult. But what happens is actually the adoption and the mindset turns out to be probably one of the most difficult aspects, because the people that are using AI now, are you probably using it in their home life already? Like, they're the first adopters. They're the people that they're using it for everything. They already know how it works. But then how do you bring along the other people on that journey as well? I think that's where there's a lot of friction. And getting around that there's no one way of doing that, in my opinion. It's about finding champions within the business that can almost be soft sales pitches for how it can improve people within their department's productivity. And I guess for a lot of it is the enjoyment of work, because it cuts out a lot of the boring administrative tasks that nobody really wants to do.
So if you've been on LinkedIn anytime soon, you would have seen the leaked Shopify memo and the Duolingo memo from their CEOs basically saying, we're going to be AI first, and we won't approve new headcount unless you can prove that AI can do it better. And to your point, probably those two CEOs are like you and I. We're using AI all the time. We're very, very comfortable with it. So Ben, just a question for you. So for everyone else that basically is now being told we're an AI-first company, what are the things that the rest of the organization needs to do? I mean, training is one thing, but how do you go from an edict from an AI-savvy CEO to transforming the whole company and not actually hiring anyone until they can prove that AI can do it better?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We actually we have a pretty strong focus on that at IBM, and not just in terms of personal adoption, but even as we're building new products. Really, we refer to it as client zero. And the fortunate situation we have is being a part of a big company is we've got a bunch of internal use cases. So really, it does boil down to this one thing that Sammy was talking about. It's adoption. So that's really the one metric to kind of track, and that's what success looks like. So really, it's about, as we try and change behaviors, as we try and build new products, we're focused internally to say what are the problems that we can see. And there's also, when it comes to AI, there's an important characteristic here. What are the problems for which we have data? So data is the start of the journey. So when you take that into account, you look at those client zero, you can actually innovate within your own organization if you've got a large company, and you've really got to, whatever great idea you have, if it doesn't get adopted, you've got to go back and kind of ask yourself the question, how great was it? And that's really, that takes a lot of effort. So I think that's how we're looking at it.
And to your previous question, one of the ways that you can smooth the adoption process is by bringing them through with you along the journey. So you build the use case with them. They are the domain experts that you're building the solution with. It's almost as if you're semi-consulting for them. You're producing the solution for them. So they are going to be your first adopters, and they're going to be the biggest advocates for whatever it is you want to roll out, whether that's something you build internally or whether you bring on a startup to produce it, or you use an external tool.
So you mentioned AI champions, and a couple of actionable things I tell my clients. First of all, lunch and learn. If you're an organisation like yours, you've got lots of different departments, you're doing one thing, maybe once a month have a brown bag where you actually share knowledge across the organisation, because there'll be someone who's found a way through and you can then share that learning. The second thing is a hackathon. I often talk about every company having two different tribes, the going digital and the born digital. And by getting those two tribes together in something like a hackathon, you can actually help solve some of these problems. So maybe, Miguel, in your experience, how do you drive this adoption? How do you get knowledge shared? Because this is, another thing I say is that in the last 2 years, we've probably seen 10 years of innovation. It's caught everyone off guard. How do we bring everyone along without freaking them out?
Yeah, and just to build on what has been said, right? I think that you need to find those advocates. And the other thing is you need to be able to measure what will be the potential impact, because that's usually the most difficult thing to convince someone. But if you say, look, I want to do A, and this is going to be the cost, but this is going to be the upside, obviously sometimes it's difficult because you don't have the data, but if you are able to articulate what is the opportunity cost, what is the upside, then you can get the buy-in from the executive or the decision maker, right, in the company. And once you get that, it's easier to go top down and try to change the culture. I think that is about the learning culture. How do you foster people who want to learn, who are curious about AI? I think that most of us in the room, right, we play with it because we are excited about it, we see the opportunities, but there are actually a lot of people that are not. And even in tech companies, I know when we launched Performance Max, anyone familiar with Performance Max, by the way, from Google? It's basically the AI solution for advertising. And it came a couple of years ago, and people were reluctant to adopt it, even big advertisers. And the reason for that is that they didn't know how it worked. It proved to be much better, like 2x better than whatever we had, but because people didn't know what was inside and they lost control, they didn't want to adopt it. Yet over time, obviously, people were proven that it was working much better, and then you bring them along the journey, as you said, right? So you need to show the use case, you need to bring people with you, you need to measure how things are working, and the reality is that there is a mindset that you need to change. It's a bit of a culture management, which has been similar in any project about digital transformation.
Staci?
I just wanted to add to that point. This is also a really important point with regulators. So you want to adopt this, but you cannot demonstrate to your regulator how you got where you got, and this is problematic. And so you might opt to have a suboptimal solution that has the transparency that your regulator demands from you, if you're in financial services, I mean.
So one thing everyone should be aware of is a fairly new thing called the EU AI Act. It was adopted by all the member states. It's now coming into legislation. It was negotiated around the time or over the time that ChatGPT launched. They had to look at that. I think it's an interesting blueprint. We're actually going to argue in another panel at 11:30 about whether the EU and the UK are behind and whether regulation is stopping it. But I think it's a great blueprint to look at, because whether you like it or not, some level of the regulation we're seeing from companies, areas like the EU, will come into it. I might just throw to you, Ben. We were talking last night at the VIP event about explainability, and you mentioned it there as well. For our audience, what is explainability, and why do you need it?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially when we come to things like agentic. So I think there's some great research out there. I think Anthropic's been sort of leading this, and there are some good papers to kind of dig into. At a very simple level, it's really when you get an answer from an AI system, it's being able to show how that answer was kind of produced. And so it's a way of kind of understanding, is the answer I'm getting potentially a hallucination? Or even more so when you dig into it, is it based on a set of data or a set of facts which are relevant to my particular situation? And that kind of brings us to context. So I think a lot of these terms, they only have relative meaning, so you hear a lot at the moment, and it's a bit of it's how fast the whole industry is evolving, but we've gone from the time like maybe 12 months ago where we thought that all of the value was going to accrue to the large language models and the barriers were very high and that's where it's going to be. Now it looks very clear that the value is going to accrue in the application space, and if we think about the applications, they're going to be focused on particular industries, and we've talked about that on the panel. I would argue even more so when you get to a particular industry, there's going to be particular teams, there's going to be peoples, there's going to be context for the user within an organization that is key, and that's where explainability starts to make sense. So when we think about that, in the last panel we talked about, you just have to get your head around the fact that we're dealing with a non-deterministic system, and that's not really how we've ever designed IT systems or built products. So it's quite squirrely. Then you have to kind of get, when you deal with that and you're building products or you're building systems, what are you doing to kind of reduce the spectrum of answers you're going to get? And so that comes down to making things context specific, task specific, putting guardrails on them, bringing in things like, things where you're going to get repeatable behaviors, and that comes down to how you feed context in when you're going to provide prompts. And when you're doing that under the hood with an agentic system, you want to be able to do that in your testing and in the product and benchmark it and track it over time, because the models aren't standing still, right? So the underlying capabilities are evolving. So it really is a moving target, and there's a whole bunch of things you need to do there. But it is really important to explain that to your users that have the context so they can validate and build trust over time. Otherwise, agentic will be stuck as a sort of productivity boost. It will never be able to get out of the gate and truly do things in an autonomous fashion.
I was going to stop you there. You were going to hear the word agentic about 1,000 times today because it's the new buzzword. Can you explain what is agentic AI and what isn't it?
Yeah, sure. And I guess that maybe goes back to the previous analogy I used about the left brain and right brain thinking. So this is where, when we talk about agents now, and we're building systems that will have multiple agents that collaborate, it's really where we are actually, if you like, we're writing code at the very simplest level, and that code is interacting with the models. And so it will do certain things with the models. We will do things like function calling. We will use RAG. We will take answers.
Hashtag explain. RAG being,
Yeah.
I'm just going to, someone in the audience, who doesn't
so
know what RAG is? A few people. What is RAG, please?
So RAG's actually a great technology, retrieval augmented generation. So it really comes down to, we're going to get answers from a model. That model was built. If you're using Claude or one of the other chatbots at the moment, you might see at the bottom of your results, these results are accurate to October 2024. So when that model was built, so there's this kind of like stuck in time thing. What you're able to do with the model is you can make them very current and up to date, and you can feed information to them as they give you an answer that makes it more specific. So that's when we say, here I'm going to feed you some information or reference this information as I ask you this prompt, and that's what we call RAG. So that gives us a lot of very interesting beneficial properties right now today. How do we improve the answers we get? How do we reduce hallucinations? And that, as we mentioned, the problem of hallucinations will go down over time. But if you think about systems and using AI, how do I make it specific to my context? Things like RAG are going to be very useful for that, to make it very adaptable, So these are the kind of things that you want to be able to have exposed to your user, back to your question on explainability.
I want to take this agentic question to muscle my way back into this conversation. So if you think about agents, you think of them in different levels, right? So a level 1 agent works with humans, and so you will say to it, okay, if the price of IBM goes below 15% of its volume-weighted average for the last 6 months, buy IBM, say. And this is a very kind of human interactive approach. There's been a couple of announcements last week on the consumer side. I like shoes from Italy, please scrape the internet and here's some money, and you can buy and show me shoes that I might like, and then I'll give you the instructions that you can buy. But level 3 agents have a goal set defined for them and an activity set, activities that they're allowed to do that are also defined for them. And then they go off and do it. And so a good example of this is and this is a bot that follows crypto markets. It's called AI XBT. This bot has now almost 500,000 followers. So the goal was to get followers, and the activity set was you can pay influencers, you can convince people in certain ways, you can tweet about these kinds of things, you can retweet about these kinds of things, da-da-da. These agents, though, in order to give them agency and in order to get them to do things, they need money. And that money has to come from crypto. They have to have wallets that they can access directly. So you're not going to get level 3 agency unless it's running on crypto rails, I will assert to you. And so in this particular case, these agents can earn a lot of money because they perform services and they can be paid for those services either through taxation or other kinds of things. You don't let them have all of the revenue because that would be a bit dangerous, and they're pretty young in their lives now, but you give them a budget, you give them pocket money as a percentage of the revenue that they earn, and they can do things. And if you look at this particular, and if you follow crypto markets, by the way, this is a very good bot, a very good agent to follow. It paid $1,000 to an influencer, and it's human overlords were like, why did it pay $1,000 to this guy? But it saw that this guy was retweeting all of its tweets. It was commenting on all of its tweets. It was liking everything it did, and so it paid this guy. It decided that it wanted to pay this guy. And then if you go even further than that, and you think about, right now in AI agents, there's this is an odious expression, but there's like master and slave agents, right? And so to get beyond that, where you're in much more of a societal structure, you're going to need agents that can convince other agents to do things for them as opposed to just making them. So you're going to have agency specialization. And so if you have given your agent a goal and an activity set that does not enable them to reach that goal, they can now look around to other agents that might have some skill set that helps them reach that goal and pay that agent from a crypto wallet, because it's not going to run on banking rails, right? Like they're not going to get bank accounts to help them. So this idea of matching economic incentives with agents to give real agency and real decision-making power is going to come from this marriage between crypto and AI. So I would appreciate the AI people out there that have taken all the oxygen out of the room for crypto to give us a little love, please, when you're talking about this in the future. Thank you.
As you were talking there about the influencer getting paid by the agent, I just wondered whether the influencer was real and it might have been a bot liking all that. Which brings me to a point. So as a futurist, I often muse on things and hope one day it'll come true. Back in 2018, I mused that one day we would all have personal agents that would actually do everything for our life admin and booking travel and insurance and those sort of things. And then I mused back in 2018 that maybe one day we'd have to write ads for robots, because I'd have an agent and I'd be talking, not reading ads, but I'd be basically allowing the agent to do the bidding for me. And this year at CES, Shelley Palmer put up a slide saying we're now marketing to bots. So Miguel, question for you from the advertising space. How far away are we from me no longer seeing ads and my agent dealing with your agent to basically do a digital deal?
I think that we're pretty close, and as you explained, right, there are already level 3, right? To be honest, the work that we have been doing and with the companies that I'm involved is usually level 1. So it's more about getting the data, trying to figure out what we need to do, and some simple tasks. But some people who are more AI savvy or these companies, as you mentioned, they are getting into that level 3 where you're getting into that point. And I think that you mentioned a couple of examples already.
So agents at IBM, are you looking at those at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And like sometimes when these things happen, right, it's sort of, you kind of get the feeling, oh, actually, what are we doing here? This is really a new word, but maybe some of the things that are underneath it aren't that new. So I guess that's, if we dial this back to sort of automation and what people are hoping to achieve with this kind of technology, we've had rules-based automation, which I guess is like your level 1 layer one example used before, that's been around for a long time, and there's still a lot of opportunity for people to adopt that kind of automation for kind of benefit. So that wave is definitely not over. I guess what we're looking for here at the agents is those that are able to go beyond the simplistic heuristics and rules that someone will program into them. And so I think that's kind of where we are right now. Again, doing that in a way that the reasoning is context specific, that you don't, if you've got a system that is important that you're using to drive autonomy into your infrastructure, you don't want your users asking it questions like how to bake a cake or plan a mission to the moon and it answering, right? So those are challenges you've kind of got to bake into it. So I think absolutely we're using agents, but the focus right now is how to take all of this knowledge in an LLM, but to make sure that when we've got an agent, he's got the goal, he understands the task, and the guardrails are in place to make sure he operates within that reliably.
And Sammy, is there a place for agents in what you're doing in your use cases?
Yeah, so the angle I look at this is how can we get value in the simplest way possible? So agents is definitely where everything is going. But in the short term, as a business, how can you get value tomorrow? Some agents are going to be amazing when you can isolate them in a particular function. So, for example, if you've got a social media agent, because you can connect to everything. But there might be some use cases where you can get a ton of value just with the naive RAG, basic RAG. So I think we're in a stage where you need to not be disheartened if your use case isn't necessarily using the state of the art, because you can get tons of value without necessarily going full-fledged agentic. But I definitely think that's where it will be going.
And you a point as well, Staci?
No, I thought your audience might be clamoring for me to give the third way that crypto will help.
Well, I wanted to inject that because you're obviously on the crypto side of the world, and I'm in the middle there. Last week or the week before, we saw PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard basically come to the table going, look at us, we do it as well. So they've said we're playing in agentic in a different way. Does that mean that they are really seeing this as a threat from crypto?
Well, I think that's level one agency. So those are consumer apps that you can use these agents to, like my shoe example would be a good example of that. But the thing that crypto gave that is the idea of a tokenized money. So without going on a tangent, there's kind of two kinds of money. There's cash and there's bank liability money. And what crypto is a digital form of cash. And banks can also do that. They can tokenize deposits. And that is required. That idea did come from crypto. And it's the idea that, when I send this digitally to you, it's yours. The banks don't have to reconcile later at the end of the day in batch files. And so they're using these notions, and I think they are also, and everybody does this, of course, they dress it up to be a little bit more than it actually is. But yeah, that's like a level one agency idea. But I do want to say that the thing that makes people nervous about AI is that these are huge black boxes and they are run by, 5 big companies, right? And some of those big companies now live in a country where the administration is making a very America First campaign, right? And so if I was living outside of the US, I would be nervous about that. And what blockchain offers, although I will say it hasn't fulfilled its promise there yet, is distributed compute. And so what I think we need to move to for the safety of society is a distributed compute AI LLM model, where you are not going to be able to, like governments can't shut Bitcoin down, right? You shut down a computer over here and it can pop up over here and they all are running the same software, the same ledger shows up on every computer. We need that in these LLM models too. And there's been some good examples of this, but it needs to get a little bit more momentum, I would say.
I would expect we'll probably be talking about that at this event next year, because that will have some promise. We have under 3 minutes left. I want to leave you with some actionable insights. I want to go to each of the panel. What are 3 things, if you were sitting in the audience right now, you'd want them to hear to get AI and AI projects deeper into their organization and get them approved and get the use case that's happening? Start with you, Ben.
Okay, so 3 things. This is kind of how we think about it as well. So I think the first is really try to identify problems where, as Dario from Anthropic said in his blog last year, there's a return to intelligence. So you want to find something that actually is a good problem to try and solve with AI. The second is try and find something that you're not reinventing the wheel. So, you're looking for something where there's a novel approach, something that you can actually come in and solve, that you're not really just coming with a me too. And then thirdly, it's just really about get started. It's sort of the potential that we all have personally to just get going, whether it's using AI out there now to start generating code or generating prototypes or getting things running. That speed is really something that is critical for us all.
Yeah, so I think for me, one part is to stay grounded in ROI. So there's so much excitement, there's so many cool things that you could be doing, but why optimize something you could eliminate, et cetera, et cetera. There's a simpler way of doing it, you might as well. Also, when it comes to use cases, I'm resistant to give use cases because often a use case you may hear at one of these events is more of an inspiration because your organization may have a different problem. Or it may be the same problem, but a slightly different nuance. So it's about tailoring your use cases around the core problem that you're seeing, rather than trying to fully adopt something that's been done elsewhere. And I think the third point would be around the point that to a person with a hammer, every problem's a nail. So if you've already implemented a certain technology in one of your use cases, this industry is moving so fast that there may be a completely better thing that you could be doing. So don't be pulled back by what you've done in the past.
On my end, I will say first experiment. Just start doing something. Doesn't have to be sophisticated. The reality is that these companies many times have a lot of resources, but in your reality, you may just be very scrappy. And as you said, the agent level 1, probably that's going to be good enough. That is going to take you to the next level, right? So don't be afraid, experiment. The second one is collaboration, bring people along. I asked my team at some point, a few months, I said, let's just get all the potential use cases that we can get. We can map them out based on impact and ease of adoption. We did like this nice quadrant, so we have a roadmap of what are the things that we need to implement in the short and in the long term, right? So people feel empowered about it instead of feeling afraid of what they can do with AI. And obviously, impact is based on ROI, based on what are the things that can help your business, so people can be more behind that. And the last thing I will say is LinkedIn Learning. Like we have so many resources in there that I think that is important that constantly, whether that is LinkedIn or another source of information, people educate themselves because things are changing quite fast, right? And what was very good a couple of years ago is not the case today, and things very likely are going to be continuing changing over the next few years.
I would say, I guess, two things. One, if you need help with adoption, find yourself the nearest 15-year-old that you can talk to, and they will sort you out. But also, I guess this reflects a little bit the industry that I come from. Just be careful out there. You think you can tell the difference, but you can't, right? Just do your own research. Don't believe the image that you see. Don't believe, like you cannot tell that this bot this agent I was talking about is not human. It speaks exactly like an OG crypto person. Just keep your skepticism about everything. It's sad to say, but
Hopefully some great actionable advice there. If you'd like to hear more, I wrote a book called Digitally Curious, available on Amazon. I've got a few copies here. I'll also be at the panel at 11:30 looking at EU and UK. But would you please thank our fantastic panel for their insights today?